Hi. In this next segment, we're going to shift our focus to the northwest axis of our basic diamond model. And now that we've talked a little bit about how to create a strategic story and about how it's important to be self-aware and to lead yourself to become a more effective leader, we'll spend some time talking about selling your story. That is, how do you get other people to agree with what you want to do and accomplish your purposes by getting them to voluntarily buy into your goals. So we introduced early the concept of buy-in, and we talked about the relationship very briefly between what we will call level 1 techniques, level 2 techniques, and level 3 techniques. Level 1 techniques are those that are designed to change people's behavior. Level 2 techniques are those that are intended to change the way people think. And level 3 techniques are techniques that are designed to help people change their values, assumptions, beliefs, and expectations about the way the world is or should be. And in the course of this discussion, we'll be thinking about how do each of these techniques affect buy-in from other people. When we think about level 1 techniques, we're talking about changing visible behavior. So some of you may be familiar with the work of B.F. Skinner, who, with working with animals and birds, tried to train them, this is often called behavioral conditioning, tried to change their behavior by offering them rewards and punishments. We use the same approaches in business. In fact, one could argue that level 1 techniques are the most commonly used techniques in business organizations by offering people rewards such as wages and salaries, bonuses, and other kinds of incentives like medals or stars or vacation trips and so forth, and punishments. These are the threats, the intimidations, the perhaps tacit or implicit or unspoken fear of what's going to happen if we don't do what you want us to do. Of course, there are downsides to level 1. You can dampen unintentionally energy if you manage by fear. So many times people say, well, how do we motivate our people? They try to use incentives and punishments. There was once a book written called The Great Jackass Theory, in which you hang a carrot in front of something and you put a stick behind it, and then the image of what's in between the carrot and the stick is a jackass. Well, many times people unintentionally treat their employees in the same way. So this notion of managing by fear has a dampening effect on motivation. One interesting perspective on this is given by Alfie Kohn in his book Published by Rewards, in which he argues that the problem with external rewards as opposed to intrinsic rewards is that they dampen energy level. He notes that the more significant problem is that the effects of rewards do last, but those effects are the opposite of what we were hoping to produce. What rewards do, and what they do with devastating effectiveness, is smothers people's enthusiasm for activities they otherwise might enjoy. So there have been a number of research studies to address this issue. One of them, for example, you put a board game in a room. You randomly select people from a population, say university students. You bring them into the room and you ask them to play this board game, Monopoly or Trivial Pursuit, whatever it might be. You say, we're going to play this game for an hour. We'll take a half-hour break a break at the half hour for 5 or 10 minutes. And then you simply record what happens. When you don't pay people to do this activity, again, randomly selected sample, they tend to skip the break and you have to shoo them out of the room at the end. When you offer to pay people to do this activity, say $10 for the hour's engagement or whatever the price may be, you find that they take the break early, come back late, and want to leave early. Same activity, randomly selected participants. The only change is you offer people money in return for this activity. So Kohn's conclusion from this is that, interestingly, if you pay somebody to do something they otherwise might do on their own, it actually diminishes their motivation to do the thing. Now, for many of you, this is a significant Weber abrasion. You're having major concerns because the vast majority of for-profit organizations operate off wages and salaries and threats and intimidations, punishments if you don't do what we want you to do. And people will say they'll work harder for big year-end bonuses or commissions on particular projects. So you're going to have to sort out in your own mind what your Webes are with regard to reward systems. It's an ongoing challenge. The research continues to pour in from a variety of settings, both on the one side saying that intrinsic rewards are more powerful, and then if you look at the work of Stephen Rice, for example, he will argue there's no such thing as intrinsic, extrinsic, that it depends on your values, and he has 16 values or principles or traits that he believes describes human behavior. So this is a provocative concept, the notion that rewards and particularly punishments dampen energy rather than enhancing energy. So we come back to this issue of living outside in versus inside out, whether or not people choose to do something voluntarily or whether they feel purchased, bought, or intimidated into doing something, and what the impact that has on their ability to perform at a high level and with high energy. So this notion of getting other people to do what you want them to do, the first issue is that you get this opportunity to think about choice versus obligation. If you consider a continental divide, and over here we have the land of choice, and on the right-hand side we have the land of obligation, then the question is, what happens if a person goes from the land of choice to the land of obligation? What happens to energy level, up, flat, or down? What happens to productivity, up, flat, or down? What happens to engagement? What happens to quality, up, flat, or down? What's your own assumption about that? Well, the evidence suggests that you pick your dimension, energy, productivity, creativity. When people go from choice to obligation, bad things happen. So when you think about using level 1 techniques, rewards on the one hand, punishments on the other, I invite you to be careful, acknowledging on the one hand that most organizations operate this way, and secondly, to stop and think about, are these people actually choosing to do the work that you ask them to do? Or are they simply selling themselves or selling a part of their time? It becomes a mercenary transaction where engagement and concerns for quality begin to dissipate. Okay?